Okay, so we're going to now do paragraphs. So let's get started. Alright, so basically your paragraph structure is pretty straightforward. Topic sentence, evidence from your first text. Now it doesn't matter what text you want to start with. I would start with the one that I guess is stronger in the point that you're trying to make. And then your second layer, your text B in that paragraph can be more of a support to the idea rather than presenting the idea, which might mean that in the first paragraph you write starts with the longest memory and then moves on to 7 stages, and then your second paragraph might start with 7 stages and your third paragraph might start with the longest memory again. That's fine, okay? You don't have to be consistently starting with the same text. So anyway, topic sentence, evidence from your first text, and then you explain the evidence from the first text, then you give your evidence from your second text, and you give the explanation from your second text, and then compare it. So compare it to the evidence that you gave in text 1. Pretty simple. So once you've done those layers of evidence and explanation, and then you've done your compare, then you head into your link sentence, which obviously ties back the idea that you wanted to make in the paragraph. So essentially, it's a teal paragraph with a little bit of a twist. You've got the C in there. So that would be T-cool if you are an acronym kind of person. All right. Okay, so we've talked about topic sentences. That's pretty straightforward. If you're unsure about topic sentences, go back to the video just before this one that talks about topic sentences. We're going to be focusing mainly on evidence and explanation in this little video. But to kind of, I guess, refresh and make sure that everyone knows what we're writing about, the topic sentence that I made for this paragraph that we're writing is Mailman and Enoch and Fred Daguerre assert that through their texts that people can be restrained from moving forward due to the memories of their past. So the question asked, how does memory affect the people in the texts? And so my answer for this paragraph is that they are restrained from moving forward because of their memories. Okay, so that was my topic sentence. Now what I want to do is provide evidence. So evidence the great thing is with these two texts, you've got a plethora of evidence to choose from. So I would really recommend to pick a range of different evidence rather than just sticking to plotline dialogue stuff. Try and use some text construction. Certainly you can't really score above a 7 if you look at the exam criteria for VCAR. Their exam criteria says that a 7, 8, 9 and 10 will deliberately talk about text construction. So it's really important that you do build that into your pieces. And text construction things can be things like, in this case, stage directions, symbolic kind of pieces that are placed in. It could be language choice. It could be form type. So like, in the longest memory we have lots of different forms of writing. So we have like diary entries, and we have editorials, and we have stream of consciousness. We have like loads of different forms. So basically any of that stuff would be considered text construction. You can talk about plotline and scene stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. So obviously that can be part of your evidence. Quotes obviously are always a big part. Talk about some symbolism stuff. In 7 staging there is so much deliberate symbolism, particularly when using stagecraft stuff. So the projections, the props that are being used, all that kind of stuff. Very heavy symbolism. That's all evidence. And obviously character discussion stuff too is evidence. Combining them is a really useful thing too. So, if you're talking about something that happens in the plot, throw in some quotes with it. If you're talking text construction, perhaps you can tie that in with some symbolism or some character discussion. So try and make your evidence, work in multiple levels of evidence. Discuss one text, when you're doing the layering of the evidence, make sure you do one text, so say the longest memory, give the evidence for that, then explain that, then when you're finished discussing the text, transition to the other text, which I'm going to show you how in a moment. So that's one way that you can structure your piece, is giving one text, giving the evidence for that, detailed explanation, and then transition to text B. Alternatively, you may choose to layer them where you give text A, a brief amount of evidence, a brief explanation, and then compare it to text B, give a brief evidence, brief explanation, and then go back, give another text A, evidence, explanation, and then a text B, evidence, explanation. You could do it like that. If you're thinking about it, like the old school essay sandwiches, so you'd just be layering very thin layers in your sandwich. You can definitely do it like that. So you can either do, like I said, one text in depth and then the second text in depth, or you can go little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit. It's up to you. I prefer the in-depth one just because I feel like when I'm doing lots of little ones, I can often not do them justice in my explanations, but you know your own writing best. Obviously, embed your quotes as much as possible. Obviously, I'm 100%, I am pro embedding quotes. Don't misunderstand me at all. I am pro embedding quotes. What I'm not pro is when people are embedding one-word quotes that really aren't quotes. You can't embed the word Whitechapel or rape, or that's not a significant word. But if you, in the rare occurrence that you might embed a singular word, it would have to be a really significant word that you then decided to pull apart. So you might kind of embed the word hurts when you're talking about how Whitechapel says memory hurts like a wound, and you might want to discuss the fact that he uses the word hurts and the physicality of that word. That would be an exception. But don't just embed words for the sake of embedding them, because just because they both use the word, rape, just because the text uses the word rape and you want to use the word rape, that doesn't make it a quote. Okay. Also, don't forget to use editing tools with embedding if you need it. So the square brackets you can use if you need to change it from saying, I, and you need it to say she, then you can obviously use square brackets to change the word to she. So you just write she inside the embedded inside the square brackets. And the other one that you can use is the ellipsis, the 3 dots. Now it is only 3 dots. Don't be throwing 5 in there. I don't want them. 3 dots, and that says there is something in between these two phrases that I've put together, but it wasn't necessary to include it for my purposes. Okay? But be aware though, evidence should never retell storyline. Assume that the person has read the text or viewed the text, and that you're just reminding them of the particular scene so that they can understand what you're talking about. So you wouldn't need to say, Whitechapel, who is the oldest slave on the plantation and has a son named Chapel and a wife named Cook, and You don't need to give me all that background because I have read it more times than you have. So just keep to the stuff that I need to know. Okay, and it shouldn't be larger than the explanation. Try and keep your evidence short and sharp, and do the talking in the explanation. So here's an example of my evidence. Now, I decided to use a piece of evidence that was quite unusual to talk about, because I felt like I wanted to show you how you could use, I guess, unconventional pieces of evidence to prove your points. And this would kind of, I guess, fall under the category of text construction. So I've started with 7 stages of grieving, and remembering that I'm proving that that memory can cause people to not be able to move forward. That's the effect that memory has on people. So I've started with a little piece of evidence and said the title of Mailman and Enoch's piece, 7 Stages of Grieving. Remember, I can shorten it now because I've said it more than once, but I've still got to underline it. So the title of Mailman and Enoch's piece, 7 Stages of Grieving, is emblematic of how a person's past has a profound effect on a person's ability to move forward. Okay, so I'm going to use the title of the text as my evidence. Can I do that? Of course. It is evidence. Is it a little unconventional? Sure. Does it mean it's bad? No. So I've got a little explanation of the evidence there. I kind of say this is looking at a text construction element that is central to the title, obviously, and the concept of the play. Although it isn't technically part of the literal storyline, it is a huge part of the didactic purpose of the text. Didactic purpose means like the main message of the text. So it can be used in evidence. Okay. Explanations. So explanations are really, really kind of where the majority of your marks come from. So if you're kind of neglecting your explanations, you're a full Harry Potter and you'll lose. So make sure that you are putting enough effort into your explanations. And I'm going to show you how, okay? Explanations should always give as much depth as possible about why the evidence you've provided is so valuable to your point, okay? And here's some tips of how to do that. 1, try and use key words that can show how your evidence is answering the question. So in every explanation, try and embed those key words back in there somewhere so that you can kind of go, see, answering the question, this is relevant, To also expand on your discussion, if you're somebody who often gets their essays back and it says, not enough depth, your problem is your explanations. And your explanations are lacking depth. And how do you fix that? Well, you can either do a few pieces of evidence, like lots of small pieces of evidence on the same idea and pull apart each one of those. And I'll show you that in my bigger example. So you kind of give lots of small pieces of evidence and you explain each one of them. And thus lots of little bits equal one big. Or you can use my patented, no, they're not patented at all. I wish I could. I don't think you can. Maybe you can. Whatever. I'm not going to make any money out of it anyway, so here it is. So I have this thing that I call the 4 questions of explanation, and I get kids to use them particularly with text response, but they are just as relevant here. Your 4 questions of explanation. And basically you use those after every time you give a piece of evidence, and they prompt you to answer them in regards to that piece of evidence that you've given. And as long as your evidence is quite specific, you'll pretty much be able to use all of them, and thus you'll be able to expand and give enough depth. So here they are. And if you're an acronym kind of person to remember things, the acronym is WHAR. WHAR. So WHAR. So what, how, author, relevant. What, how, author, relevant. Okay. So what does the evidence show? So what literally does your evidence show me? How does it show it? So what about the evidence shows that. So if you're saying the evidence shows that Jimmy is lonely, how does it show that Jimmy is lonely? What about this scene shows Jimmy's loneliness? Does he shout, "I'm lonely"? So the words, "I'm lonely," point in this direction. What is the author saying by showing this? So why does the author want me to know that Jimmy is lonely? He's wanting to say that loneliness is a universal experience that everybody goes through at some point in their lives. The author wants me to know that even Jimmys can feel lonely. I don't know. So what is the author saying by showing this? What's the deeper message about it? And that's a good question to use because, again, we're talking about author intent, which high range responses really need to discuss. They need to discuss what is the author trying to do with this text. That it's not just this like random story made up, that it's there for a purpose, that he's trying to say something. Okay, so question 3, very important. And then question 4 asks, how is this relevant to your argument? So that shows you, that encourages you to link it back to that question, link it back to the keywords. So that's where you'd be really peppering in your keywords to kind of go, hey, see, how is this relevant? This is how it's relevant. Okay, so a lot of the time when people do their explanations, they cover maybe 1, maybe 2, but very rarely do they do 3 and 4. And it's those 3 and 4 that kind of get you that extra mark. So if you're somebody who struggles with depth, use those 4 questions, write them down, memorize them, use the acronym. All right, here is my example of my explanation of my evidence was basically the title, 7 Stages of Grieving. And now I'm going to explain how that proves my point. So I've said, the play shows through its titling that Indigenous people have had to work through pain and trauma of their collective history, not unlike a person mourning the loss of a loved one. By aligning the name with the Kubler-Ross's proposed psychological stages of grief, which is those, if you look at the back of the text, they have the 5 stages of grief, and I'm sure if you've studied the text, you already know all about the psychological stages of grief. By aligning the name with the Kubler-Ross's proposed psychological stages of grief, Malman and Enoch imply that the collective history of Indigenous history has caused unimaginable trauma to their people that has required them to have to work through the grief they feel in order for them to be in a place where they can move forward. Okay, so what I've done there is really explained how the title, 7 Stages of Grieving, shows that, that the authors believe that Indigenous people, can't move forward because of the grief and because of the memory of all of these things that have happened to them that have caused them this grief. Okay. Now, what you'll also notice in my example is there is a lot of red. All of those reds are me touching back to the question. Working through the pain and trauma, that's like the effect that it has of the collective history. Remembering that the question asked about individual and collective memory. Again, we've got collective history caused by unimaginable trauma. That's the memories. Work through the grief so they can move forward. Okay, so bang, 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 hitting the question as much as I can. Okay, now when you have done that, then you can move forward and layer more of text A evidence and explanation if you'd like. So when I was talking earlier about how to structure out this essay, I talked about how you would do one text and then you would do the next text, so text A, and then transition into text B. So this is me doing text A, lots of text A, all the stuff I want to talk about in text A, and then I'm going to eventually transition into text B. So I say, then you can layer. So then I've got my next layer. So I'm then talking further about the cover and the title and stuff like that. So again, I'm using text construction. So I'm talking about the back cover. And if you've got my version, I'm not sure what the other version's back cover looks like, but my version is this one. And on the back of its cover, it's got the list of the 7 phases of Aboriginal history, and then next to it and kind of interlinked with it, it has the 5 stages of dying. So my evidence, which is in pink because I like to colour code, this is further reinforced by the play's back cover, listing the 7 stages of Indigenous history overlapping Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of dying. The way that the stages of grief and Aboriginal history are intertwined on the back of the cover further assert that Indigenous history has caused their people to be held back. Okay, the effect, remember? This can be seen in such instances as the connecting of the historical act of invasion being aligned with denial, alluding to the laws of terra nullius used in the colonisation of Australia. So if you, I don't know whether you can see that, but where you've got invasion, denial is kind of like overlapped with it, and so that's what I'm talking about, and saying like that that's done deliberately to kind of allude to the idea of invasion was a denial of Aboriginal people's existence. Okay, now I'm going to explain how that proves my point. This law, meaning the law of terra nullius, denied Aboriginal people the rights to their land as they were not deemed human beings. Enoch and Mailman assert that it is these traumatic collective memories, such as the dispossession of land and denial of their humanity, that have held back the Indigenous community from moving forward, as they need to grieve what has been taken from them. Okay, so I explain how my evidence proves my point. And I'm particularly focusing on that explanation. I'm particularly focusing on that question 3. Okay, you know, why does the author put this in there? Moreover, so I'm giving another piece of evidence. Okay, so I'm popping lots of text A evidence in. Moreover, the positioning, and I'm still talking about this back cover, the positioning of acceptance, there's acceptance there, the positioning of acceptance and reconciliation at the end of the phases of Aboriginal history and stages of dying, again, that was my evidence, further imply that it would be only possible to reach these stages by moving through more painful earlier stages. Okay, so they're down the bottom, and they're down the bottom because you've got to wade through all the other crap first. Thus, it is clear that the authors of 7 Stages of Grieving wish for its audience to understand the profound impact the collective memory of their ancestors' trauma has forced them to wade through their grief before being able to move forward. Okay, so that is all my text A evidence. And all I've done is actually talked about the front cover and the back cover. So if anyone's saying, oh, this text is so hard, there's hardly any evidence in it, I haven't even opened the book and I've got evidence. Okay, so no excuses. So evidence, explanation, that's how it works. In my next little video, I'm going to talk about how you transition to the next text, how you transition to text B, and how you do comparison. Okay, see you later.